The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Excuse me. Welcome to our California Nevada chat for Friday, January 29th. And on behalf of our Northern California and Southern California sections, we welcome everyone. Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director Tom Addis, Chief Assistant Executive Director, Chief Operating Officer Nikki Gatch, Chief Financial Officer Jeff Johnson, our production team Bryce Seaver, Caitlin Doyle, Tyler Miller, and of course our section leadership here in Northern California, Dee Dee Moriarty, and in Southern California, President Robin Shelton. Our guest this morning, very grateful for a return of Dr. Bella Mattias. Dr. Mattias is the Health Officer and Deputy Director here in Solano County. Tony Rice. Tony is our California Alliance for Golf Voice at the state capitol in Sacramento, and Tony is a managing partner of Rice Englander Associates, whose offices are in Sacramento. And of course, Craig Kessler and Kevin Fitzgerald, Director and Assistant Director of Governmental Affairs for the Southern California Golf Association. So a lot has happened in the past 72, 96 hours. There's been no shortage of activities and events. And so let's get to it. I'd like to introduce for some opening comments the Northern California PGA President, Dee Dee Moriarty. Dee Dee?
Thank you, Len. Thanks again to our speakers. Really appreciate your dedication to being on our calls. Thank you for the opportunity to say hello, and keep safe, everybody.
Thank you, Dee Dee. And Tom?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. And it's great to be here. We appreciate you being here this morning. And a lot of you every single time we do a California Nevada chat. So we appreciate that very much. Appreciate also Bryce in the background, Nikki in the background, monitoring what we do and keeping us going. And thanks again for hanging in there with our great game of golf, outdoor activity, and providing the recreation that so many of our golfers and citizenry really like and deserve. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce our president, Mr. Robin Shelton. Robin?
You're on mute, Robin, sorry.
All right,
Nikki,
take two.
Nikki, I wanted to say that, which would have made my day, but okay.
Tom, don't go there. It's still early. Good morning, everyone. My apologies, but it's nice to hear or have you here. I think if you're anything like me, you have a lot of questions from what came down Monday and what you were expecting, or at least what I was expecting. This totally caught me off guard. So I'm really excited for today's session to get some more information, both on kind of why it happened so quickly, and then, hey, some more advice kind of looking to the forward. So I think it's very cool that we get to do these and very timely for when something like this happens. So looking forward to today's session, and thanks everyone for being here. Tom, back to you.
Thanks, Robin, very much. We also like to welcome our honorary president, Tony Latendre. Tony, thanks for being here. And Len, there you go.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And as you know, Northern Nevada, Northwestern Nevada is part of the Northern California PGA section, and status quo up there at this point in Washoe County, and for the state of Nevada, the order that Governor Sisolak put in place, Thanksgiving period, is still in place. So facilities are up and running, and there's 25% capacities at restaurants, and the casinos are open and such. So we're grateful for that. Certainly in Reno at the moment, they're dealing with the snow, but so far so good. As Robin mentioned, a major development this week was Governor Newsom on Monday lifting the regional stay-at-home order and counties returning to the appropriate tier outlined in the blueprint for a safer economy. As of this past Tuesday, of the 58 counties in California, 54 are in the purple, which is the widespread tier, 3 in red, which is substantial, and 1 in orange, which is the moderate tier, and that's Sierra County, in the greater Sacramento area. So taking that right into our first speaker, Dr. Bellamatias. Dr. Matias is currently the health officer and deputy director for Solano County. His most recent prior posts include various roles with the California Department of Public Health and medical director of the epidemiology program in the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. Dr. Matias received his medical degree from the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine and completed a residency in occupational medicine and preventative medicine at the Harvard School of Public Health, where he also received a Master of Science degree in epidemiology and a Master of Public Health degree. So, Dr. Matias, thank you again for being with us this morning. And, you know, we have the lifting of the regional stay-at-home order. We've returned to the tiers. Vaccines are being administered around the state, around the country, around the world. And, you know, are we through the holiday surge? Is this positive news? And yet there's talk of the variants, and even double masking has appeared in some articles read this week. So Dr. Matias, again, thanks for being here. We'd love to hear your analysis of the current situation.
Thank you very much, Len. I appreciate it. Thank you for the invitation. Yeah, there are actually several pieces of good news with regard to COVID. The first is what you've already referenced, which is that the governor did lift the stay-home order throughout the state, but that includes our county here in Solano and includes all the regions of the state. That order was lifted on Monday, and so that means that the counties go back to the tier that they were at based on their disease rate. So here in Solano County, for example, we are in the purple tier. But the good news is that even in the purple tier, professional sports may resume outdoors, and so too may outdoor recreation. So most of the activities that you all have been working on are able to resume as they were able to function in early December. So here in Solano, that's where we are back to is purple. As you noted, most of the state is in purple, but that does mean that people can resume their outdoor activities, including golf. The good news, number two, is that the disease is beginning to substantially abate across the state. We are, by all indications, beyond the holiday surge, and people do appear to have reduced the activities that were causing disease to spread. They've reduced those activities pretty substantially in January, and we are beginning to see sizable reductions in disease. Here in Solano, for example, at the moment, our disease rates are half as high as they were just 2 weeks ago. So statewide hospital impact is being diminished so that hospitals can relax. ICU beds are becoming more available. The positive percentage for testing has reduced. And so I think almost all the indicators are pointing towards substantial improvement in the weeks and months to come. And the third piece of good news is the vaccination is underway. So the advent of vaccination will benefit greatly the prevention, I think, of any subsequent bad surges. As more and more people are vaccinated, there'll be fewer and fewer people who are susceptible. And I don't think we will experience a third wave that was as bad as the second wave. We almost certainly have waves of illness from time to time, but they'll be much more like the earlier wave was, where the impact is much lower and much more easily controlled. So with regard to vaccination, the only real problem has been that the pace of vaccination is not what anybody wants. And I would suggest that the biggest problem is really bad communication on expectations by leadership. People have been led to believe that the vaccine is available, therefore go get vaccinated. And that's never true with a new vaccine that comes out. It takes literally months for vaccine to come along in big enough quantities to vaccinate sizable numbers of people. We've been vaccinating here in California since the end of December, and we have done well to vaccinate the healthcare workforce and the first responder workforce, as well as the staff and patients in long-term care facilities where the death rates have been highest. We have also in most of the counties moved on to additional tiers of professionals and to people 75 and over. In some counties, there's enough vaccine that they can do people 65 and over. In others, there's just not enough vaccine for that. The biggest barrier by far right now apart from messaging the wrong expectation, the biggest barrier is lack of adequate vaccine. In our county, for example, we could probably vaccinate 5 to 10 times as many people per day as we are, but for the lack of vaccine being available. And that's nobody's fault. There are 2 manufacturers of vaccine that are approved for use in the US. Those manufacturers are supplying over 100 countries with vaccine, not just the US. They're pumping out vaccine as quickly as they're able to, and that just inherently creates a limited amount of vaccine that comes out every week, and then ultimately works its way out to the county level. So contrary to how it's frequently discussed and reported, my impression is that the vaccination is going exceptionally well, given those limitations, given the fact that we don't have enough vaccine. Most of the counties are fine with respect to people to vaccinate. We've got more volunteers than we have doses of vaccine to give. We have mass vaccine clinics established in many, many locations, but they can't really operate because there's not enough vaccine for them to operate. So the frustration for everyone is going to be that this is going to take a while before we can get enough vaccine out so that everybody who wants it can be vaccinated. I don't really know, when push comes to shove, how many people will ultimately be vaccinated. Polls vary from 40% wanting it to 60% wanting it, and I think it depends on who offers it to you and how much you trust that person. So our goal is to get as many people vaccinated as possible. But I think given the current restrictions on vaccine production, it will probably be summer before we have enough people vaccinated that people can pretty much say, yeah, if I want it, I can go get it. So that unfortunately is going to continue to be a problem. I think most counties, including ours, have websites that indicate where we are in vaccine distribution. And a lot of the counties, including ours, have a sign-up sheet on the website that allows you to indicate your interest, and then we get back to you when you are eligible to go to a location for vaccination. Lots and lots of changes occurring at the state constantly make this a very difficult process. The definitions of who is in what tier and therefore what priority accrues to each group, that has been changing weekly. It's so hard to get a handle on actually implementing it before the state goes and changes it. That too has been an additional problem that we've had to deal with. But none of it is driven by malevolence. I think everybody is well intentioned. It's just that most of the people who are involved in the process are inexperienced in dealing with a pandemic because we haven't had one in a really long time. And a lot of this is learn as you go. So all of those details notwithstanding, the vaccine is available. It is starting to become more and more widespread. And I think that, that also represents really good news. So I think, Len, that I answered your questions. And again, those are the 3 points that I wanted to make. I think things are definitely looking up. There's light at the end of the tunnel. And hopefully in the not too distant future, we will all be feeling a lot more comfortable about this disease. Now, at the same time, there are people who really want everything to be horrible in terms of how they look at things. So yes, there are multiple strains emerging for this disease worldwide. This is a virus, it changes. All viruses change, some more quickly than others. Measles virus changes incredibly slowly. Flu changes so rapidly that every year there are new strains that have to be put into the vaccine. This is a new disease. We don't know how quickly it's going to be changing. It's entirely possible that we will have to have boosters periodically in order to stay protected against the currently circulating strains. The first few new strains that were identified essentially only had the impact of making the body produce more virus particles so that it's more easy to transmit it to other people. It did not change the harm from the virus. There's not a greater likelihood of a bad disease, no greater likelihood of hospitalization or death, but it's more transmissible. So if you can imagine, the original strain, maybe when you cough, you put out 1 million virus particles. With the new strain, it might be 10 million particles. So obviously, if you're putting out more virus particles, more people can become exposed. So that enhanced transmission is the problem with the UK strain and a couple of the other strains that were identified. And the good news is that their outer surface is identical to the original strain. So the vaccine is just as good against them as it was against the original strain. The one strain that is demonstrating the potential for reduced vaccine efficacy is the one out of South Africa. But when they say reduced efficacy, instead of the vaccine being 95% effective against infection, it might only be 80% effective against infection, but it still might be 95% effective against bad outcome from infection. And in that regard, it would be no different than flu vaccine. Flu vaccines often have a slight mismatch with what's actually circulating by the time the vaccine gets out, and yet they still protect against death. And since, protecting people from a bad outcome is really the most important thing, the vaccine is probably just as good with the South African strain for that as it is for the other strains. Where it may not be so good is actually preventing infection from occurring. That said, both manufacturers are actively looking at the new strain to see what they have to do to modify the vaccine so that if there's an additional booster made available, it would be amply protective. But viruses continue to change constantly, and we should just recognize the fact that this is new enough that we don't know how long the vaccine will be protective or how frequently we'll need to be revaccinated. I think that's it.
Yeah, Dr. Mattis, thank you. So a couple things as the vaccine is becoming available and the age group is dropping, as we said, in some cases it's 75, 70, and now down to 65. I pulled some stats recently about California COVID by the numbers, and it looks as though the ages of the confirmed cases is in that 18 to 49 group. Would we think as the supply increases that post after the 65 and older are vaccinated, that is it almost an open age after that, or how do you see that coming down to the younger folks?
Yeah, I think it's what you said. I think after we feel that we've gotten the 65 plus well taken care of, it'll probably open up to all ages. Now, the vaccine's not permitted for youngsters. I think one of the vaccines is good for 16 and over, I think Pfizer, and Moderna is good for 18 and over. So it's neither of the vaccines is approved for use in children, but it will be, once we are done with the 65 and over, I suspect we'll basically remove the age restriction, and anybody above 18 or 16 respectively would be eligible for vaccine.
Okay, and Dr. I said, again, I read in a place or two about double masking. Thoughts on that in terms of the variant? What to do with the
double
variant?
Masking, in my opinion, double masking is a gross overreaction. I think the problem has been that people have not really come to terms with how this disease transmits. And there is a tremendous number of individuals, including many decision makers, who believe that it's an airborne virus, which as an epidemiologist, I can swear up and down, it definitely is not. That's not to say that airborne spread never occurs, but it is clearly a droplet-borne disease. And the mesh size of one face mask is more than adequate to stop droplets, and therefore to stop most transmission. And even though you're producing more viruses with the new strains, they're still in droplets. And so the droplets will still be stopped, whether they contain 1 million particles or 1,000 particles. The mask doesn't care. It's stopping based on size, and droplets are big. So I don't actually see any valid reason to recommend double masking based on the fact that new strains have emerged. I don't see any validity to that at all, because none of the emergent strains have shown a greater propensity for airborne spread. So if the mask was good enough for the original strain, it's good enough for the new strains because they're still the same particle sizes that are dangerous.
Okay, and Dr. Mattis, we do have one question just came in. Should I be concerned with golfers who smoke at our facility, even if they are more than 6 feet away?
Well, smoking, passive smoke is something we've known to be a problem for a long time. But we typically believe that smoking outdoors the smoke dissipates so quickly that it doesn't really pose a risk to people around you. So I would say that you should be no more concerned about that today than you would have been a year and a half ago. If you're offended by the smoke, then you want to move away from it. It's probably not a particular health risk if you're 6 feet away from a smoker outside, because it's very unlikely that you'll be inhaling enough of a concentration. But it's also an offensive product, and it's something that you have every right to want to avoid exposure to. But the COVID has done nothing to change the risk of smoking.
So as we head into spring and summer, Dr. Mattis, do we have now the difference between certainly a year ago, certainly even 6 months ago, is that the vaccines are up and running, and of course, thank you for the good news. Are we concerned with about a summer surge with activities and
Well,
increasing?
yeah, I think that what we saw last year demonstrated when we can expect surges. We can expect them around the times of gatherings and summer, Memorial Day, Mother's Day, maybe. Yeah, probably Mother's Day through July 4th is a heavy gathering time, and that would be the next expected surge. So I do think we'll see one, but I think it'll be much, much smaller than the one we just experienced because so many people will be vaccinated. So I do believe that by then, there'll be enough vaccination to genuinely blunt the transmission of disease, not eliminate it, just blunt it. But if you recall, we had a much, much smaller surge last summer than we had over the holidays. And I think that level of surge is very easy for us to tolerate compared to the one that we just came through. So I don't think it'll be any bigger than that.
Okay, and Dr. Mattias, another question has just come in a little bit about process for us as golf professionals and facilities. Knowing that the COVID-19 spreads with droplets, wouldn't it be safe to put rakes back in bunkers on our golf courses?
I apologize that I don't know what that question means.
Okay, so in on the golf courses in our bunkers, which are primarily sand filled, we have rakes in there. So after playing a shot, the idea would be to restore the surface through raking it. So it's the same as, it's a contact surface that one person would use and then leave it there for the next, same as taking out a flagstick from a hole, I think. And to some extent, we've been avoiding that. Early on, there were no rakes in any of the bunkers and such. So it has to do with contact surface transmission.
Right, and droplet transmission does occur through contact with surfaces. That does definitely happen. It's called fomite transmission. The real issue is what do you do with your hands before and after you touch the rake? If you are a person who can be very careful about not bringing your hands to your face without washing them first, then the rake's not going to pose a risk to you. I suspect you're not going to lick the rake handle. The risk would be that you touch it with your hand and then your hand touches your mouth. But if you can avoid that, then you're fine. And wearing a mask certainly helps remind you to avoid doing it. But if we want to be abundantly cautious, I would say keep doing things as you have been until we essentially get the equivalent of an all clear. There is going to come a point in time where the level of transmission of this disease will be low enough that the pandemic will be declared essentially over. And at that point, you can return completely to normal behaviors. Prior to that, I wouldn't recommend it, not because I think that there's really a genuine risk of transmission, but because perception in our world is everything. And by not having the rakes available, you are conveying to the users the recognition that you are paying attention to all forms of transmission.
Yeah, Dr. Mattias, thank you for that. So stay the course. It has proven successful. And again, back to the science, as we would think of moving, from purple into red. Again, will that be based upon positivity rates and hospitalizations and vaccine distribution? Yeah.
It'll be based on the number of cases occurring per day and on positivity rate. And so for example, in Solano County, well, let me step back. The rate has to be below 7 cases per 100,000 population. So if you know the population of your county, divide it by 100,000, multiply by 7, that's how many cases you can have per day. So in a county with, for example, 500,000 people, you have to get below 35 cases per day to go from purple to red. That's a pretty small number. Most of the counties right now are probably running closer to 100, or probably running closer to 25 to 30 per 100,000. So that same 500,000 person county is probably 120, 150 cases per day right now. And they've got a long ways to get down to below the 30, 35, or whatever the number would need to be for your county. But that's the primary driver, is how many cases are occurring per day. And then you also need to have a positivity rate below 5%. So it's really all the same metrics that were operating last year are now back in play.
All right. And another question, Dr. Mattias, your opinion on the transmission potential of outdoor dining?
Well, the problem with So think about it this way. The disease passes from one person to another in the respiratory secretions. If you share food, you share utensils, you're really close to each other and you're talking, into each other's face, you will transmit. So transmission during dining among the people at the table is a real risk, just as it is in your own home. There should not, however, be any transmission to the staff or from the staff if the staff are wearing masks as they should be. And there should not be transmission from table to table if they're far enough apart. So I really don't believe that there is a risk of meaningful transmission from outdoor dining that is any different from the risk we already live with in our home, because we're typically going to be dining with people that we are otherwise interacting with. Now, if you're in a situation where you're dining with strangers or you're dining with people you rarely interact with, you really have to pay attention to wanting to be enough physically apart from each other that you can have that 6-foot distance. So I'm not recommending that you should have large business lunches with a bunch of people at a table. I think that's not a good idea. But outdoor dining with family and friends, given that you're already interacting with those people, will not change the level of risk that you're already experiencing.
Okay, Dr. Mattis, that takes care of all the questions. Again, we can't thank you enough for being with us one more time, particularly at times like this when we have so many major developments, which has not been uncommon at all in the past 30 days. So appreciate jumping with us on such short notice. We'll certainly keep you on our list and hope to have you again. And thank you so much for leading us as a state and certainly here as a resident and employee here in Solano County.
Thank you very much again for the invitation.
Len, you okay? You there?
Okay, all right, thank you. Did you hear any of that?
No, sir. I didn't.
Okay. All right, so we thank Dr. Mattias, and next up, Tony Rice. Tony, the managing partner of Rice Englander and Associates in Sacramento, and Tony is our voice for the California Alliance for Golf, keeping us up to speed on what's happening on the Hill. And we did have a legislative committee call this morning and talked about some things. Tony, and I'd like, if you would, run that down for us, the early phases in processing of bills that are now coming before the legislature. As you mentioned this morning, many COVID-related topics, certainly not a surprise there. And we even talked about our legislative day and the possibility of it face-to-face, person-to-person, probably a long ways away, but maybe an opportunity for a virtual speak here and there. So Tony, again, thank you for taking your time to be with us today and what's happening on the Hill.
Sure, always a pleasure, Len. Thank you for the invite and having me today. I'll try to keep my comments brief. I know you all are very busy and probably have a very full agenda. So consistent with what Len just kind of teed up for me, I do want to kind of talk about where we're at in California as it relates to just our general process in terms of budget and legislation. And then I appreciated listening to the good doctor previous to me jumping on and hearing some of the empirical data. And I'm happy to answer kind of questions from there's, the difference between the actual numbers and then you have the politics of it all and when things might open. So let me just start off by saying, obviously, we're at the latter part of January. What that means for the California political process and the legislature is up until the middle into June, there's a dual process. And I don't mean to dumb this down for anybody. I just want to kind of lay the groundwork. So I apologize if I'm speaking about things you already know, but just very quickly, the budget kicks off in January. The governor will release his proposed budget for the upcoming year. And at the same time, there's a concurrent track where legislation has various deadlines and timelines that must be met in order for bills to move forward. As of right now, the governor has introduced his proposed budget, and as Len just briefly discussed, Typically speaking, over the next course of the next several months in a normal year, quote unquote, what will happen is budget subcommittees will crunch the numbers, and we kind of ramp up to a crescendo where a balanced budget is supposed to be passed by June 15th for the governor's consideration. Well, they are obviously fast tracking quite a few things, but it relates to COVID. There's nothing really that's going to be in there of specific benefit to the golf industry in California. And that's not, it's not hard to imagine. It's not like a lot of public interest groups or public advocacy groups are lining at the trough to get their usual carve outs or dole outs. There's obviously a very serious issue that's going on in this world, as we all know about. So they're trying to fast track some policies and financing that's going to try to mitigate and help with all of the COVID fallout that we continue to deal with. There is that separate track of legislation. We just passed really the very first deadline. It's a very small hurdle. Bills must be introduced by the middle of next month. It'll be after February 15th or so that we're going to have a really great idea as to the bills that are out there, the universe of policies that we will have to respond and react to. And there's always a handful of bills that the golf industry cares about, whether it be environmental related as to what can and can't be utilized on golf courses. Sometimes there's tax issues that will come up. The last several years, CAG specifically, and I know some of the interest groups that all of you represent have come to the table in California to deal with AB 5, the independent contracting initiative from several years ago that responded to a Supreme Court case that overturned the previous independent contractor status. So we've been fine-tuning along with a whole host of others. Frankly speaking, I think CAG in the golf industry has done exceptionally well in trying to fine-tune the legislation to what can really work for our professionals and independent contractors. So we have just a little bit more work to do. Even last year during a pandemic abbreviated legislative session where really half of the year was off, with no one working on anything because everyone was trying to stay home and stay safe. We were still able to get some fine tuning. So there's a little bit left. We will update and report as that becomes more focused and clear as the legislative cycle kind of ramps up throughout the course of the year. We are hopeful, as Len mentioned, that we will have, at least I will say, I am hopeful that we can do another in-person legislative day in Sacramento. CAG has always been fantastic at many of you, as well as members of the board who aren't on the call, really take the time to come to Sacramento, walk the halls, meet the legislators, meet the governor's office. And I think it has borne fruit for all of us over the last several years. And it's something that I think we look forward to doing, as well as, frankly, there's a lot of, really golf avid advocates, elected officials who like to hear from all of us. Now, that will obviously be contingent upon the Capitol opening its doors to the public again, which it still is not. You can all imagine why with the skyrocketing case numbers over the last couple of months. So piggybacking on the doctor's comments, and I know all of you are keenly aware of the situation that we all are in with COVID right now. We hope to get those numbers down between just not as many gatherings as well as the vaccine, that we will start hitting the metrics that the various tiers allow for. But even when we were under the purple, red, orange and yellow tiers before, the Capitol was not open. So just because we start seeing an opening up of tiers, or as folks start to do better with case numbers, just because maybe you hit a better tier may not mean that the Capitol is going to be open. So one of the things that we talked about is, and it was just brought up today by Emmy Minister, was could we in fact do a virtual meet and greet with some folks? And I think that would be a really good idea. We'd have to break up a legislative day. So I say all this because if there's anybody on the call who's interested, we open this up to everybody when it comes to the CAG days. It's my opinion, the more the merrier. So please let Len know, or I don't know, I'm sure Craig Kessler is on the call, or someone from his shop is on this call. If there's an interest in joining us, please let some of them know, or email me, contact me directly, and we can plug you in as well. So I think that about covers the practical budget, legislative, Sacramento politics. I think just moving forward, it's all about the vaccine rollout right now. California has not done a good job at all. And everyone up and down, at least in politics and government, will tell you the exact same thing. California is switching, trying to get a third-party administrator. It seems to be plural because they've announced a Blue Shield of California, as well as Kaiser is going to be taking over the vaccine rollout. Where I will say that there's a divergence between science and politics in this whole business is that I came on and there were a couple of questions about who's going to be in line for the vaccines to be rolled out. And while that is a practical and scientific consideration, we know what age groups seem to be most impacted and affected. But you also have policymakers making decisions as to industries that should be at the forefront of the vaccine rollout, at least or until there's greater dosages available. I think Johnson & Johnson just finished up their trials. I think it was reported today. So as more doses become online, it'll be faster to get to the age groups, which is what California wants to do. But there's a back and forth, for instance, i.e., whether or not teachers should jump to the front of the line, because so many school districts around California have never opened, including here in Sacramento. Should they be vaccinated so that we can get the school districts open sooner than later? That's a political discussion that's happening. And if that is going to be the case, as we know right now, there's a finite amount of doses that are out there. If you put a large group of industry professionals at the top of that list, regardless of age, then obviously everyone gets pushed back down. So that's just kind of the status of where California is right now. I expect California policymakers to be dealing with COVID for the next several months. It is everybody's hope, goal, and intent that the pandemic will be behind us sooner than later. But as of right now, we continue to have quote unquote business as usual, which has been not much other than the absolute necessary things that are happening. We hope that'll change, but as we all do, I know all of you share that same thought as well. But we're kind of in the middle of it right now, and policymakers are trying to figure it out as well. So with that, I know I talked a lot. I apologize. I went a little over what I thought I wanted to talk about, but I'll turn it over to you, Len, and any questions.
Yeah, Tony, thank you. Thank you. That was quite a bit, but it's really, really important. And, you're on the front line for us there. So again, grateful that you can join us. Also, having read this week that with the lifting of the regional stay-at-home order, going back to the tiers, restaurants are opening, some lawsuits are being dropped from business owners because of the fact that they can get, they are back in business again, certainly with the precautions and protocols in place, but they're grateful for that, and so are we. Would we expect, there's also been, maybe this is just conjecture, right? But there's also been some pretty good noise about the recall. Do you think this might soften that activity?
You talk about a political question. The recall is about as political as it gets. I will say that I think it'll qualify. I mean, I've mentioned this before. I'm not sure if I shared it with this group. I can't recall the last time I was on here and whether the recall was really gaining steam. But for those who may be out of state or just haven't seen, there's an effort to collect enough valid signatures. I believe it's 1.2, 1.5 million, somewhere around there, of valid California resident signatures that's trying to be garnered to at least put on the ballot the consideration of whether the governorship should be recalled. I will say that this governor and this administration are deathly afraid of that qualifying, because it seems to be it is on course to do so. I believe the advocates for the recall effort have announced somewhere around 1 million, a little over that, and that was about a week old, so maybe it's more now. If in fact they do get the requisite amount of signatures, and that would need to be verified by the Secretary of State's office, at that point in time, there would be a date announced for the actual vote for when California will consider that. I think the thought process by the governor's office is that if they do a good job with the vaccine, they start, pulling back on some of the restrictions that a lot of people are fighting back against, that there's enough time in their mind that they could do a good enough job that the impetus for the recall won't be there if in fact it qualifies and there is a vote. But I will tell you that this administration is keenly aware of the recall effort, and they are keenly aware that there's a lot of dissatisfaction, not just with Republicans. It's not just a purely partisan issue, but a large swath of California, Democrat, Green, Independent, and Republicans alike are unhappy with how things have kind of transpired. Some of it I think would be unfair to put at the governor's footsteps, but I think there's a lot of things that could very well be, attributed to him and his missteps. And so whether or not that changes the metrics for a political calculation by the governor's office of what to impose and what not, I think it definitely has. What that means practically for the rest of us trying to live our lives, we don't know yet. But it is certainly, that effort has permeated the thought process of the administration. There have been key departures of top level folks that have been backfilled by, frankly, political hacks that I've known for all of my career. They're very good at what they do, and they're, as talented as they are in a lot of different areas, their primary goal is to position, whether it be their client, their previous clients, or in this case, the governor, in the most favorable light possible, because I think that they do fear a recall effort. So we'll see how it rolls out. But it is being taken seriously, and it certainly is being taken seriously enough that I think it will be consideration for how the governor kind of navigates the next several months.
Well, thank you, Tony. Thank you for that. And again, got you on short notice this week, so I really appreciate you taking the time from your day to be with us once again and keep us informed on what's happening on the Hill. Are you yet able to get back into the Capitol, or not quite yet?
We can get into the Capitol, but it is very limited. I would have to go to a committee for a specific purpose. I'm ushered in by a sergeant and then ushered out. So for all practical purposes, the Capitol is closed to the public, including folks in my industry.
Okay, well, Tony, thank you, and we'll stay in touch, of course, and thank you for your work here with us and with the California Alliance for Golf.
Always a pleasure, Len. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Yep. Take care. Okay, and finally, our Director of Government Affairs for the Southern California Golf Association, Craig Kessler, who's been our voice and guiding light since just coming up on a year now. We did launch, I believe, last April on our chats, and as Tony talked about what's happening on Capitol Hill, Craig can drill down for us with some local activities. So Craig, thank you for being here, and I understand you're going to turn the camera on.
I guess we're going to maybe give this a shot, huh? I guess the only thing more disconcerting than staring at a blank computer screen or one with a fixed picture is staring at one that has your photo on it. But good morning. Thanks for having me on again. I hope my internet bandwidth holds up and this works. If it doesn't, quickly let me know. Dr. Mattias gave a lot of the generic information that I had planned to give this morning, and I'm not going to repeat that. I will kind of fill in some of the granular details of what he shared on how it applies specifically to golf, and maybe how it applies specifically to some of the counties within the state, which still are encouraged to provide regulations, a layer of regulations over and above that required by the state, depending upon their caseloads. Just before I do, and before I close with another subject that I've mentioned before that bears mentioning, I'd like to just echo something that Tony Rice just said and remind everyone, particularly this audience, because this is the audience that was so passionately interested for the most part in the AB5 debate and the whole notion of independent contracting. I can't emphasize enough that actually it says I should turn off my webcam, so I'm going to do that, and I hope I can still be heard. So we had a tough internet connection. So you got to see me for a couple of minutes, and as you can see, that was no great treat. So we'll go back to without the picture. Golf, the California golf community did exceptionally well with AB5 and subsequently with AB 2257. As Tony mentioned, there is some language, some vague language in one of the 12 prongs of the 12-prong tests that establishes validity as an independent contractor that is our goal to fix in 2021. That's not much. That puts us ahead of scores of other industries and sectors in the state of California. In addition, we walked away with some exemptions for youth sports coaches, which is extremely important to a lot of institutional junior golf programs. And we came away with something that I predicted was next to impossible, and that is a pathway through third-party vendors for some form of CADing on an independent contractor basis. Taken all together, that's given us some confidence that there's an opening going forward to have perhaps in California what so many states benefit from, and that is a youth caddy program that would then tie into the Western Golf Association's Evans Scholarship Program. Some of you on this call may be aware of that program and how it works. Can't emphasize enough, it's a fantastic nexus of golf facilities, college educations, and societal benefit that our game could use a dollop of over and above the intrinsic values of the program. Now back to the first issue, and the one that's always on everyone's mind, and that is COVID-19. If you were surprised on Monday that the governor seemingly came up with an amazing pivot, and I was certainly surprised, and I was faulting myself for being surprised because I prided myself on not being surprised by such things, but I was not alone. The legislature was surprised, everyone was surprised that the governor decided to, actually on Sunday, we had some indicator because the Orange County Register and the Sacramento Bee were reporting that the California Restaurant Association had received a letter over the weekend from the governor saying they would be very happy Monday morning, which could only mean one thing, that the regional stay-at-home order was either coming off or being substantially modified to at least permit some form of dining, and that proved to be correct. That was our first indicator. And so that regional stay-at-home order was removed. I was a little surprised. And remember, I'm in a county which still is reporting 0% ICU capacity availability, and I always thought that was the marker for coming off the regional stay-at-home order. But as we dig through, read media accounts, and hear accounts from public health officials, apparently even this county is projected in 4 weeks to be at the 33% number. I can't figure out how they get to that number, and neither can the media accounts figure it out. We'll take it at face value and assume it's correct. It's extremely positive news, and it's far more positive than we thought. But what I want to emphasize is while that restores a lot of things on a statewide level, there are still, and while 54 of the 58 counties are all on the purple tier, some are deeper purple than others. So for example, in Southern California, where for obvious reasons I'm much more knowledgeable, the vast majority of the counties, including the second largest county, San Diego, hew entirely to the state standards as it relates to golf. So suffice it to say that if you can read those and see what the state is doing and read it at that level, and what Dr. Matkias shared with us this morning, you know what you can and can't do. The good news about that county is that it's been extraordinarily responsive, but there have been times during this last year where I have had confusion about certain things that appear on their website, and it seems to give contrary direction. And they've always gotten back to me, generally within less than 24 hours, to clarify the confusion. And then again, when I give an opinion about what something may mean, who knows what that's worth? I think my opinion's worth something. But when the person in San Diego County, who's head of emergency services, to whom public health reports and who is the liaison with the state of California, says this is what it means. We can share it with our clubs and facilities, and they can have full confidence that they know exactly what the prescriptions are, what they can do, and what they can't do, and how they can do what they can do, and what they choose to do. Having said that, counties like Los Angeles, and I'm going to assume there are others, particularly in the northern part of the state, that have tougher caseloads and still have golf-specific orders and also have orders on youth sports that sometimes contradict those things, are free, again, to add additional layers of restrictions. And they're even free over, and so, for example, in Los Angeles County, again, the largest county, not only in this region, but the state, does have restrictions over and above, for example, still on group play. That is something I'm optimistic it will be inevitably lifted much sooner than I thought just a couple of weeks ago. But nonetheless, as of today, it's still in place. And then there are certain things such as a separate youth sports order that clearly permits and specifically permits, for example, high school tennis teams and golf teams to play intramural competitions, not inter-team competitions. But the two largest jurisdictions in Los Angeles County, and again, Los Angeles City, have chosen not to permit that because and for a lot of reasons, which may be a little detrimental to golf, but they make eminent sense on a larger public policy scale. So keep in mind when you hear those, when you see or hear those kinds of contradictions, they're there for reasons, they exist. You always have to be careful to start with the state and then move to the county, and then oftentimes move to the very city that's within the county that you're located. If you think that's a jumbled confusion for you, just imagine what my life's been like for the last 9 or 10 months trying to go through those things. And again, I want to give a special shout out to the County of San Diego because they've been extraordinarily helpful in allaying confusion there. And I'll simply say to some other counties, somewhat less helpful. And it's greatly appreciated in San Diego because I know in this pandemic, there's so much that's on their plate. Now, the final issue, and I've blown through all that quickly, and maybe I've raised some questions. And by definition, feel free to contact me. I think all of you know how to do that because oftentimes, I'm responding to very, very specific questions, and it takes a while and it takes a lot of verbiage to answer them specifically. And this is not necessarily the forum to do those kinds of things. Privately, offline, I'm available to do it and happy to do it. But I want to get back to a point I emphasized a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to become a broken record on it because I think it's so impactful to our industry, and it's so important for all of us who are leaders in this game and industry to focus our attention on it. The same factor that served us so well in a pandemic, purely for serendipitous reasons, is the precise factor that is our biggest problem going forward. It's our biggest problem now, and it's this: that we present to public policymakers during the pandemic, as Dr. Matthews would tell you, that maxed out per the current rules that apply in most counties in California, which are 4 individuals playing in reservations no less than 10 minutes apart. In essence, on the average size golf course, that roughly works out to 1.3 human beings per 1 acre of available space. Now, 4 of them are together, and so I don't want anyone to assume by that comment that when you play golf, you have an acre, almost, well, 1 1/3 of you have an acre to yourself. I'm not sure what 1/3 of a human being looks like, but in other words, that ratio makes very clear to public policymakers who don't understand golf that golf is unique as an outdoor activity. And unlike a beach or a park or a bike path or anything else, at the middle of the day when the weather is beautiful, there's no control over entry and exit. Golf courses can absolutely guarantee that ratio because we charge money. Golfers are used to it. Golf facilities are used to it. And you just can't have 50 people show up at the same time. They show up in that rhythm per reservations and touchless contact and all the rest that everyone on this call thoroughly understands. And that's why golf was the first activity brought back in most counties back at the beginning of the pandemic. That's why golf in in this toughest of places through December and January, which is Los Angeles County, continued with those groups of 4 maxed out at that 1.3 to 1 ratio. But when you think about it, when you don't, I'm going to force you to think about it. With the competition for land so great from recreational groups, environmental groups, and when I say recreational groups, I mean just open space, just the claim that parkland is precious, and parkland is particularly precious in those communities that are less affluent than some others. And golf by definition is, if you break away from some of the stereotypes about the elitism, which we decry, properly so, nonetheless, something which only puts 1.3 persons per 1 acre that's available space at any given time, that is elite in the sense, not elite in the sense that we often refer to it, but it's elite in the sense that it appeals to a very limited number of persons. And so those communities that come forward and say, why don't we release it just so I can take my kids and put them on swings, or I can just walk in the park, or I can picnic, or AYSO soccer or baseball or tennis or any of the other recreational activities. And increasingly, we're looking at that. And there are lawmakers out there, one this week in the city of Los Angeles, who boldly stated that those golf facilities owned by the city are a waste of land in a time when they could be used as temporary homeless shelters. That won't happen. There's all kinds of reasons why that will not happen in the city of Los Angeles. Understand, people who get elected are thinking that, and they have people who support them. And that thinking seeps in and causes other problems for the game. Or for example, Kevin Fitzgerald and I, our next call is with the manager of a facility, not going to name a city, but it's an affluent city nonetheless. And quite honestly, are moving to consider selling their little 3-part golf course and driving range, which they say makes money, but they need a whole lot more money than that golf course can generate. And if they could sell it to the developer, they could solve their crushing pension debt problems. Now, I admire their candor in putting that out there as the reason. And I will suggest there is something called the Park Preservation Act in California that may stifle that. But I think everyone on this call needs to know that's the thinking. And as we are so congratulate ourselves and are so happy, and we're working hard to maintain the bounty that COVID-19 tragically dropped in our lap, as anyone would hope for, and we have exploding demand. Despite that, just that demand in and of itself has not been enough to stop the kinds of discussions from groups. And it's going on in all kinds of places in this state. And I'm making you aware of it because these things, for example, the small city example came across my desk at 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon. It sprung up on a council agenda. And Kevin Fitzgerald and I are actively involved in so many of these things. We have a lot of success to a point, but it's fast developing into somewhat of a tidal wave. And if we can't stop that while we are clearly kicking it in the market and we are generating revenues at golf courses on behalf of municipalities that weren't seeing revenues before, we know we will keep some of this, but we won't keep all of this, and yet we're having those problems. And to those of you who are working at private clubs and private sector who somehow think that what I just explained does not affect you, let me also, I'll encourage you, contact me, and I'll put you on the Twitter feed of that LA City Councilwoman who thinks those golf courses should be closed. By the way, she has a number of public and private courses in her district. And when you look down the Twitter feed, what comes up constantly from those people responding positively, it has to do with the property tax. I'm going to call them breaks. That's what they are. The very benign property tax treatment that private clubs get in California. That's per the California Constitution. So there are some protections built in there. But I hope everyone on this call understands that if a ballot initiative were to appear that made the point that those benefits are too great and they ought to be lessened in some way, does anyone doubt that it wouldn't overwhelmingly pass? And so there are connections. And again, I think California has done so much better than other places in the country that recognizing that golf is golf and golf is one, and there aren't really distinctions. The ecosystem is related. whether it is a 3-par golf course with a driving range, which, by the way, we're told anecdotally there's about an hour wait to get on that range. That's how, and they raise the prices. There's no discounting going on at these places, and yet that's not good enough for this city because of those needs. So with all of that competition, with other things like, housing prices and needing for the land, that thing, again, I'll simply close with this and answer any questions if there are any on substantive matters. That keep in mind that 1.3 to 1 ratio that served us so well in being able to play golf and attract people to our game and hopefully keep them in it, is really the source of our greatest existential problem. And that is increasingly, there's far more people don't play golf than do play golf, and they are becoming increasingly less tolerant with each passing day of that small number's ability to commandeer so much land. Now, if they own the land, can't take it away from you. They can't shell it. They can't do anything with it. However, they can tax you more in order for the privilege to keep it. And so that's a bit of a cautionary, a caveat. I'm sorry to be a spoil sport, but again, as I'll just simply finish, that if all of you could see what I see every day, talk to the people I talk to every day, read what comes across my desk every day, and hear what I hear every day, and recognize that those forces that are in competition with us for our property and those challenges all have one thing in common. They are all far better organized than we are and infinitely better financed to take that organization and win these battles. So with that, I'll turn it back to Len and Nikki and see if I've raised any questions. If I've scared you a little bit with the closing thing, that was my intent. And it wasn't to scare you as some of these political pleas are right now with nonsense that aren't based in fact. These are very real things, and these are very real challenges that I'm seeing on a daily basis at exactly the time where the demand is incredible, and the returns, and when the food and beverage comes back, those returns will be full. But those returns off those golf courses and those club memberships, even in the desert, where there was great fear about the fact that the Canadians wouldn't come, they discovered something. There are people other than the Canadians who are filling those club memberships and are filling those resorts during their particular season. So that's all good. But just close with the comment that as much effort as we put into growing the game, it's not possible to grow something unless you have places to grow it. And the places most in jeopardy are precisely those places we've aimed at, where golf has not generally been a popular activity. Laudable that we've tried to extend it to those communities, and I think we've had a measure of success with the programs, but those are the places most in danger. And where is that going to leave us down the line? And I think it's up to leadership organizations. I know all of you are going to go back to your jobs. It's not your job to look at these things, but it is the job of golf's major leadership organizations and institutions to look out over 5, 10, 15, and 50 years. And that ratio needs to be put front and center. And this is a perfect forum to do it, because I'm loath to give people ideas that they didn't have before. And it never occurred to me that selling off golf properties could be a way to solve a pension debt crisis. And I don't really want to advertise that publicly for good reason. So I'll relinquish the floor now. I'll have to apologize. I made Tony Rice look good because I talked even faster and stuffed in more things that I hadn't planned to stuff in. So I'll yield now and answer any questions if there are any. But again, thanks for having me.
So Craig, thank you for all of that, and particularly the aspect of the threat to the golf courses and the facilities themselves. So a comment that great way, as your opening comments, and a great way of stating our case and why we are uniquely positioned to operate responsibly. Thank you, Craig, and again, important information. There is a request for that Twitter feed. I wonder if we might be able to perhaps come up with that between now and the end of our session today. So I don't know if you or Kevin might be able to get that to us and we can get it out to everyone.
Well, what I can do is get it to you and to Tom, and you could, I'm sure you have organs to get it out. You're asking me to walk and chew gum at the same time and stare at a blank computer screen. Not gonna, come on, you know me long enough. I don't think I can do it.
Hey, Craig, what's the name of the LA City Councilwoman that you're referring to on Twitter?
Nithya Raman, 4th District, and tellingly, 4 years ago, or a little over 4 years ago, David Ryu won that council seat, and he ran against against the chief of staff of the former council member, 3-term council member, who and beat her rather handily, running as a reformer, a bit of an insurgent. And I would say in his 4 years, and tellingly, that district has Griffith Park at its heart, which then includes those public golf courses, but it also includes Wilshire Country Club and Lakeside Country Club. So it's not as if there aren't a lot of golf in that particular district, and a lot of very interesting and affluent neighborhoods, I might add. So, and I would have to say, from in my opinion, David Ryu delivered on the promises he made. He sponsored ethics reform and various other things. That wasn't good enough. He got challenged from the left as being a mere reformer, and she beat him. She knocked the 1-term incumbent out, which is stunning. And again, her anti-golf animus is pretty strong. So what strikes me is not that there are persons who hold these views, but when these views knock pretty good incumbents out who actually had one office running on many of the same things, but it just wasn't strong enough or far enough. You really need to take note of those things. Again, there are a whole lot of reasons. Don't anyone worry. That's not going to happen anytime soon, but that's in the air. Other things that we're not going to like are going to happen as a result of that. I think it echoes many of the things that Tony said. It's just what you hear, what you feel, what you see, what you smell, and what you taste in the political winds. And this thing is in the political winds. And it comes from so many different angles: financial angles, political angles, social angles, and the degree to which there is truth in them. Again, we have very much advertised that 1.3 to 1 ratio. Why? Because it was absolutely consistent with maximal concepts of public health and safety, that we could play golf during a pandemic. It was a godsend. But then again, we've made that very public, and so keep that in mind, and that will come. And I can't say it'll come back to haunt us. It's just, but it's reality, and it's one thing. As I think we've been very effective in overcoming misperceptions about our environmental record, and really about who plays golf. Golf is, golf tends, golf in California, when you go to a golf course, and even many private clubs, looks like state of California. That comes as a surprise to some people that don't play golf, but that but just leading with the truth is a very easy task. The problem is when you lead with the truth of that ratio, where do we go from there? Nithya Raman, 4th District.
Okay, thank you, Craig. And that's Nithya, last name Raman, Raman. Nithya, last name Raman, in the 4th District, as Craig mentioned.
Yeah, so particularly if you live in the 4th District or work in the 4th District of city of, not 4th District in LA County, but 4th District, city of Los Angeles. So it's Hollywood Hills, Los Feliz, it goes over into the Hancock Park, a little bit over into Sherman Oaks, and all those areas, and over actually into Toluca Lake. It doesn't reach Studio City, but I think includes Universal, but I'm not positive. Comes right up actually to where the SCGA offices are, but they're just over the line and into the 2nd District of Los Angeles. So yes, so give her a shout. Let her know that you don't agree with her.
Well, Craig, thank you. Again, you've been with us every time we've had. When we started twice a week last year, moving to once a week, moving to every 2 weeks now. Thank you so much for being part of us all this time. So time to start to wrap up, and what I'd like to do is turn it to my colleague and dear friend, the Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director of the Southern California section, Mr. Tom Addis. Tom?
Thanks, Len, and gosh, thanks to the doctor and to Tony and of course to Craig. That was quite an informative hour, and we really appreciate that. I want you to know that Nikki has posted on scpga.com the link to and the Twitter handle of Raman on scpga.com. So take a look.
It's actually, sorry, Tom, it's actually posted here in the chat and answering Mr. Matheny's question.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate that. Just a couple of minutes from our section president to close out. Robin Shelton, please.
Hey, there's no way I will go for a couple minutes here, but hey, I appreciate everybody's time. It was very cool to hear from Craig and Tony, and like I say, for somebody who myself I think has been following this very closely, to get some insight into what happened on Monday and that I wasn't the only one caught off guard. So if Craig Kessler, the guru of all things government, was caught off guard, I don't feel so bad. So it was nice to hear that, and nice getting some background on the politics behind the changing of the order. But hey, at the end of the day, it's good for us. It's good for golf and good for our clubs and golfers, that hey, as long as we can safely keep doing what we've been doing, safely continue to allow people recreation opportunities, golf continues to be the greatest game mankind has ever invented. And then when you can go through things like this and pandemics and be what's available to people, it's been proven again. So thanks to Mr. Rice and to Mr. Kessler for being here this morning, and hope you all find it helpful and beneficial to you and your club. So thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic weekend. And Tom, back to you.
Thanks, Robin. And it is a privilege to be involved in our game and business, and we all should appreciate that. Our next chat is February 12th. We're doing every 2 weeks, as most of you know, and we'll be fortunate to have a return of Mr. Tyler Dennis, who is the Director of Operations for the PGA Tour, to give us some insight on how the tour is proceeding and a little bit of history as to how they're proceeding as well. And then we'll have our local Los Angeles surgeon and representative from the COVID task force here in Los Angeles, Dr. John Landsberger as well. And of course, Craig will return at that time as well. So thanks again, Len, thank you. Again, thanks to Nikki and Bryce for making this possible, and much appreciated. Thanks, everybody. Len?
Thank you, Tom. And Robin, thanks for being with us. And also some closing remarks from our president, Didi Moriarty. Didi?
No, thanks, Len. I just want to thank our loyal speakers that have been with us for a year now, basically, that have given us so much of what we needed in terms of information. It's really been invaluable, and really just for me, I'm grateful that we're beginning to see in a good way the end, the beginning of the end to all this. So everybody keep a brighter future in mind. It's coming, and just be patient and stay safe, everybody. Thank you.
And has been mentioned, we've had this success, as Craig mentioned, certainly in no fashion that any of us could have come up with. But yet it's been our behaviors and the way we've gone about things that have kept us going and keep us thriving as we head into spring and as we head into summer and look forward to increased activity. So thank you all again as operators, staff members, owners, for the adherence to the protocols and everything's safe, not only at the facilities, but in social gatherings and at home and with friends and family, just looking out for each other and taking care of each other. As Robin said, certainly what brings us together is the greatest game of all. To Caitlin, Nikki, Bryce, Tyler, our production team, for once again bringing us on the air, thank you so much. Dr. Mattias, Tony Rice, Craig and Kevin for all of their work and giving us the facts. It was nice to have some good news today. Of course, it was also important that we had some cautions and understand that there's another side to this as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being with us this morning. Have a great weekend. Please continue to be safe. We're looking forward to the Masters in about 90 days and perhaps then the PGA in about 120 days. And there is talk about possibility of patrons and at both of those events. So again, additional positive signs. Enjoy the weekend, be safe, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you.